Most brands think growth means making it easier to buy. More stores, more stock, more ads, more reach. That sounds smart, but in luxury, it can wreck the thing customers are paying for. When everyone can get the product fast, the product stops feeling special, and once that feeling drops, price power usually goes with it. Hermès built the opposite system. It took one of the most desired bags in the world and made access part of the value. Not just the leather, not just the craft, the friction. The weight, the uncertainty, the relationship, the fact that money alone does not guarantee the sale. So this is not really a fashion story. It is a strategy story about artificial scarcity, anti-marketing, and why refusing demand can raise demand even more. And the part most brands miss is simple. The Birkin did not become powerful because it was rare by accident. It became powerful because Hermès built a machine that keeps it that way. Why most brands cheapen their own demand. Most companies run the same growth playbook. They push awareness hard, widen distribution, keep products in stock, and chase volume across as many customers as possible. On paper, that looks efficient because more availability should mean more sales. But that logic starts to fail when the customer is not only buying function. When the customer is also buying status, taste, or identity, constant access can weaken the signal. You can see this in how normal retail trains people to behave. If products are always available, the customer learns there is no rush. If discounts show up often, the customer learns patience pays. If the product sits next to many substitutes, the customer starts comparing features and price instead of attaching meaning to ownership. The item turns into inventory. Once that happens, demand gets softer because the customer knows the market will come to them. That creates a hidden problem. Many brands think they are serving demand, but they are actually flattening it. Every markdown tells the customer the brand will bend. Every wide rollout tells the customer the product is common. Every extra unit sitting unsold tells the market that scarcity is not real. And if scarcity is not real, desire often cools faster than managers expect. Luxury works under a different set of rules. In status markets, part of the value comes from limited access. People are not only paying for utility, they are paying for what ownership says. So if a product becomes too easy to buy, the social signal gets weaker. The object may stay useful, but the meaning around it starts to slip. That is where artificial scarcity comes in. In plain business terms, it means supply is controlled on purpose, access is filtered, and uncertainty does some of the persuasion. The product does not need to change much at the raw utility level. What changes is how the customer reads the offer. Limited access can raise perceived value because rarity itself starts to act like proof. Hermès understood that better than most brands. Instead of treating strong demand as a reason to flood the market, it treated strong demand as something to guard. This is anti-marketing in the purest sense. You do not chase everyone. You do not beg for the sale. You do not rely on noise to force attention. You let distance, selectivity, and refusal build pressure. And that pressure matters because visible but unavailable products often trigger more desire than visible and easy ones. Once you see that, the Birkin story changes. It was never only about a leather bag. It was about building a purchase system where access itself became the first test. So what does the system actually look like? At the center of it is a simple but powerful idea. Hermès does not let the Birkin behave like a normal product. In most stores, if you want something and you can pay, the transaction is straightforward. You ask, they sell. Hermès changes that logic. With the Birkin, access is often selective, allocation is limited, and the path to purchase can depend on store relationships and inventory decisions that stay mostly out of public view. That uncertainty is not a flaw in the system. It is part of the system. And that changes the meaning of ownership. When money alone does not guarantee the sale, the product starts to signal more than wealth. It begins to suggest patience, proximity, insider access, and acceptance into a filtered buying process. That is a very different signal from simply buying an expensive item off a shelf. The bag stops reading like a purchase and starts reading like admission. Now, you might be thinking, isn't that just controlled frustration? In a basic market, yes, and it would backfire fast. But in a status market, The barrier can raise the reward because the customer is not only buying leather and hardware, the customer is buying what the barrier proves. If access stays restricted, ownership feels earned, and what feels earned usually feels more valuable. Which brings us to demand quality. This system does not only reduce supply, it filters buyers. Casual buyers often drop out when the process gets uncertain or slow. People who only wanted the bag because it was trending may move on. But the buyers who stay usually want it more, not less, because delay can intensify commitment. Once someone invests time, attention, and store relationship into the process, the product can gain psychological weight. The bag becomes more than an object. It becomes a goal. That is why scarcity can strengthen pricing power. If demand stays above supply, and if the buyers who remain are highly committed, Hermès does not need to lean on markdowns or promotional pressure. Margin stays clean because the system avoids the normal retail trap of oversupply, followed by discount cleanup. Most brands damage pricing when they chase volume too hard. Hermès protects pricing by refusing to let volume set the rules. The resale market adds another layer, and this part matters more than most people think. When a product holds value well on the secondary market, buyers read that as proof that the brand controls supply with discipline. Resale demand does not create the original desire on its own, but it reinforces the signal. It tells the market that scarcity is not theater. If people are still willing to pay high prices after the first sale, the primary market gets even stronger because buyers see evidence that the bag is hard to replace and hard to access. So this is anti-marketing, but not in the sense of doing nothing. Hermès still shapes perception. It just does it through the product, the store, the ritual, and the refusal rather than loud campaigns or broad persuasion. Most brands try to reduce friction at every point. Hermès uses selective friction to raise meaning. Think of the difference between an open supermarket shelf and a velvet rope. The item inside may be the same type of object, but the line changes how people read the object before they ever touch it. But this only works when the rest of the brand can support it. If a weak product copies scarcity, customers read manipulation. If the quality, history, and customer ritual do not back up the barrier, the whole thing feels fake. That is the part people copy badly. They imitate the weight, not the trust. So the lesson is not to act mysterious for the sake of it. The lesson is to control access where access changes meaning. Keep distribution tight, protect price, and make entry feel like part of the value. Implementation and payoff. What Hermès built with the Birkin was not just demand for a bag. It built a gate around demand and turned the gate into part of the offer. If your business sells status, expertise, or any premium signal, watch the parts of the system that quietly drain value. Overdistribution, discounting, easy access, and weak customer filtering. Ask one hard question. Does your sales process raise perceived value? Or does it flatten it every time you make the product easier to get? Once you start seeing demand this way, the goal shifts. You stop asking how to sell more units right now, and you start asking how to protect the conditions that keep people wanting in. If you want another breakdown like this, subscribe and watch the next one on the brand that changed an entire market by refusing the standard growth playbook.